Hello and welcome. This is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. Feedback is immensely important. Feel free to reach out to me. Alright, 2 ways to do this is the first way, email, and the second is comments on YouTube. Now, I greatly appreciate all of you. And, just word of mouth really works. And, spread the word and, spread out that, hey, heard about this podcast, The Harboring Light, check it out. And also, if you have comments, questions, concerns, let her know. Alright, so, since it's Friday, I'm getting current with all of you. So, with Father's Day ahead of us, I'm giving my thoughts on the aspects of Father's Day, and I'm getting my thoughts about the aspects of male roles in Western society, and I'm just gonna talk about it. Here we go. Okay, so thoughts on Father's Day, thoughts on the male role in Western culture. Now, I cannot speak upon all the cultures, but the aspects of how men and women are taught, it is for the most part traditional. But it's quite interesting how, that agenda changed itself. And it's getting back to the aspects of the way it should be with how everything should be centered around, focus on the importance of the role. I wouldn't say role is, the how everything is placed in the dynamic of men in our society. Because let's face it, be honest with yourselves. A really good example of this is working on an oil rig, okay? Now, working on an oil rig is very lucrative, when you think about the aspects of, well, of course, there's seasons to it and everything. But for the most part, how come there's no real push for equal opportunity in roles like that? How come there's not really any real push, for equal opportunity in being working sanitation or garbage worker? So you work your, you can get a lot of good benefits. You work your way up. It can be all these kind of things with it. How come it's not that? Really laborious jobs. Now, every now and then there's outliers. Some time ago, I saw a female garbage worker, and and then the whole thing with being a lineman and stuff, and the whole thing of being a part of construction and everything. As I said, some time back, it was a deal advertisement where they're talking about, the aspects of empowering women to be in roles like, construction and so forth. When I don't know, that's just being far-fetched. But the point here is that there is a lot of sustainable value in the aspects of what men have and will continue to contribute to our society when it's allowed. You know, innovation is there in the aspects of beyond building and structural feats. You know, when you get in the aspects of so many different elements, you know, business alone. Okay, so here's what I have points of views about this. Okay, so I worked a lot different sectors when I was this is it's interesting. You know, I'm still in a job market, but in a self-made way. So anyway, so traditionally in the job market here, I work a contractor, and then retail, and then corporate, and and these facets of roles, and being associating building and talking, and having rapport, and everything that there is to do with working in relationships. There's a lot of different dynamics when it comes to men and women. Now, I'm merely speaking from my point of view. Everybody has their opinions, but and nuances. So there's that. But I'm just telling you from my point, because this is why wouldn't I? This is my show here. This is my thing. So anyway, let me get into this. All right. So I noticed that most of the time, when it comes with the dynamics, whether it's women in the workplace or whether it's now this isn't always the case, where it is a co-worker or it's a woman, and there is the boss or something, or versus a man that is a boss. There's not a lot of different shifts in that. No, it depends. It varies, but for the most part, when women are in power, it is sort of finding a balance between being a people pleaser, and see, that can run a risk of things being displaced a lot in the workplace, because as you know, you cannot please everyone all the time, and then and your best, you just can't do it. You drive yourself mad if you think that is a valuable possibility to do. And also with the aspects of conflict and everything, things are flow a lot differently. The aspects of not everybody can always be heard, and it's just subtle things like that I noticed that are very different when we get into the fact of men and women running in the workplace, especially when we get into the different sectors. And then I noticed that a lot of times when men are in the role, either if you are working in proximity with men, or you have a male boss, most of the time things run to where things are very concrete. Things are just the way they are, and and then there's a lot of collaboration. And then when there are conflicts, conflicts are solved in a very different way. And so what this means is, most of the time, now this isn't always the case, but most of the time, things are hashed out, where it's not dragged on with the aspects of conflict in the workplace to where it becomes, personal when it shouldn't be. Hard things taken personal when it shouldn't be. Because sometimes there is a lot of value in the aspects of understanding, especially when you get into a professional business setting. You should not take things personally, because you really don't know what that person is going through. You don't understand like the dynamic in which people think and address things. Because you don't. That's just not. We're all individuals, and even though people who say, "Oh, we're all individuals," when they're pinned in a corner, they want to say, "Oh, well, you're an individual until you don't think like me." Those things play itself out quite differently when we get into this dynamic here in between how things flow or work themselves out in the workplace. And also, moving on to interpersonal relationships, especially when we get into the aspects of dating, or you get into aspects of friendships, or you get into, and then, all of that, and then also the aspects of families, building relationships, lifelong relationship, when we get into marriage and so forth. Excuse me, I'll be right back. How these levels are seen quite differently, they're just seen quite differently. Things are moved quite differently. Now, here's the thing. When you have the perspective of viewing relationships, that relationships are about the aspects of what is the end goal of this. And then also, I think it's quite interesting too when you see a relationship like for those who view it like this, is that's quite that it's really impressive, And now, break it down like this. Okay, so let's say with the aspects of careers and end goals and accomplishments. Depending on what sector you want to go to, or what kind of life career goals you have, you don't achieve those measures without putting a lot of work and effort into it. Now, let's place this into interpersonal relationships. You cannot. You say you want all these things. Yeah, I want to be here with married at this point, or I want to find my partner at this point. I want these many kids, or I want my partner to look a certain way, and so forth. Oh, that's all well and good, but what kind of aspects are you bringing to earn these things, right? That's where that whole thing comes to play with that question here, proverbial question, I guess you can say. What do you bring to the table? And so, when it's pushed that to normalize, oh well, I just bring me to the table, you're really saying to your significant other, or someone who would put up with something like that, it's not a very valuable catch, because you're saying, I am in myself, I'm telling you that I'm not willing to put in any discipline or work to make my goals real. And the difference in between men who understand that versus men who just accept it and just say, whatever, I take what I can get. You get a lot of different end results in the way that your life goes. That's why this perpetually being single and this idea of being a single mother is no joke, because it's the end result of having this complacent mindset that either one or two things or a lot of things. But me, this is how I say it, even one or two things. You're just complacent and you don't really want to put in the work and the effort to find what you're actually looking for. Or I'll take it back, three things. Or you just view the world in a very transactional means, where I give you this for what I get back. What am I getting back in return? Right? Or you don't want to admit that you just want to you just want to, for whatever reason that you haven't worked out, you just want to just be filled with conflict for some reason, and you just don't know how to resolve that, or you just don't want to resolve that for some reason, underlying reason that is your personal issue. So that's why I revere back to the aspects of why it's very important to have strong male roles and treasure that and take care of that and honor that and revere that in society. Because if you don't have that, the aspects of culture and other generations thriving, it's not really there, because you have a whole bunch of people, especially what hurts the most is children, because they have the mindset of thinking, well, you know what, hey, I can't either, it's fine for me to just be just say, oh well, at least, it's one thing to say at least I tried, but did you try? And that's the difference of blurring that up, where you just start out with this defeatist attitude and you didn't actually try. And it's one thing to be very reflective and very transparent with yourself into saying, okay, well, what do I need to do to change in order to get to point A and point B? And also with the aspects of saying to yourself, well, well, maybe I need to check my emotions and where's my rationality going, and not to take things so personal. Take a self-reflection on that. Now, when you have a lot of men that are respected and feel that they can express themselves in that way, so many things change in the aspects and that dynamic in which life goes, and also the aspects in which men and women see themselves is quite different too. Now, I can't tell you the difference between a woman who understands this versus a woman who doesn't understand this, and even the chemistry is quite off. It's different, but versus a woman who understands this versus a woman who doesn't understand this. Now, what am I saying? Now, traditionally, I don't know, I just think with this whole thing, traditional versus non-traditional, I just think it has to do with just being not appreciating how things naturally go and how everything between men and women naturally are. Now, when a woman who naturally sees things for what they are, they're very, they don't find that is some sort of fault or flaw for it to be that it's derogatory, being submissive, or it's a derogatory, being nurturing, or it's derogatory. These things, they see these things as supplements. They see these things as the way in which to have a healthy and well balanced life. Be it myself. Now, versus a woman who says, well, and then also there's a lot of value in the aspects of being very appreciative to what you have, and not, feeling the need to be outside wanting more, because that's the tricky and funny thing with that. Now there's nothing wrong with wanting the very best out of life. Hold on, let me see. I'll be right back. Alright, so there's nothing wrong with wanting the very best out of life, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to work hard and save and have money and do things so you can enjoy your life. There's nothing wrong with that. But when there's constantly this perpetual idea, more, there's never enough, well, you know what? You'll find yourself stuck in a rut where nobody's ever good enough, or nothing ever is enough. So everything's always a constant conflict and a problem. And so, when you have that mindset, things are quite different. Even, the aspects of, okay, well, I've decided that that's not enough for me to just be a wife and mother. That I want more, I want more. Or, so I'm going to, there's nothing wrong with that. That's, good. And then having the foresight to say, well, maybe I won't work well in being domesticated. Maybe that is so, I'm going to give myself all to building up this lucrative career. And then also, that's all well and good, but a lot of times when that happens, the natural dynamic of being soft and just being reflective in a way that a woman is, you see a lot of shift, because there is a lot of expectations to take on the role and have, traits that a man would normally have in order to get ahead. And then, things get really strange, and, this whole thing of being very abrasive when you shouldn't be yet, and all these things. It shifts the dynamic in a way in which men and women communicate and relate in business relationships and relate to each other, to where there's a lot of conflict in the workplace. And then tie this into interpersonal relationships. The dynamic is different, because that said woman has the perspective, oh well, let's see what's the overall of let's measure him up. Okay, so he's got to be this. This is just a laundry list of items and expectations that realistically, do you yourself showcase these things? No, you don't. Oh, but that's fine, because guess what? the hypocrisy lies within saying, well, you know what, you should accept me for me. Look, you should be grateful, because guess what? I am making all this exuberable amounts of money, and what I bring to the table is said things, right? So because of it, just me is enough. And so there's something to think about. Now, moving on to the aspects of Father's Day, the aspects of the way in which, over the years has been seen in a very different light. Now, that, and it's quite interesting with the aspects of advertisement and how that plays a role in Western society. Now, advertisement is, even though it in itself is, can be exceedingly annoying, when you think about it, in the aspects of how on the negative end of it, it can be invasive and just always in your face all the time. You feel like the whole reason behind it is to, in itself, just take everything without giving any substance. It's quite interesting on the aspects of how advertisement in itself, which I'm talking about in this month, shapes culture. Now, I used to see ads where, it's getting back to basics here, but in this heyday where, it was ads where, oh, look at Dad, what he can do, and, pretty much the, celebrating and having the aspects of, he deserves it to kick back and relax, and, sorry about that, kick back and relax, and just enjoy his accomplishments. And so when did that change, with the aspects of how this idea of single motherhood in the aspects of, well, I am the father, I am the mother, and this just bent of saying men don't quite measure up, or they don't mean that much, started to come into play. I noticed the shift when it started coming to play. It was subtle in the 90s, with these aspects of, female power, female centric, and then this aspects of, oh, well, I'm this sassy single mom here of the 90s, is the way of the world here, and I'm just gonna take charge. And then also with the aspects of having the disposition to where, I have to be everything all at once, I gotta fry the bacon, I gotta make the money, and not only fry the bacon, gotta make the money to fry the bacon for my family. And I'm doing this all alone, and I'm gonna be sassy while I'm doing it and look good at the same time, And a lot, you saw a lot of sorority roles like that, but it was still, traditional in the realm of seeing that in itself. And then it just shifted to where, hey, it's either this whole thing where men are seen as buffoons, right? or the aspects of perpetually violence against men is funny. Now, the worst offender of this is the show Everybody Loves Raymond. Now, I've talked about the show before, but I'm going to talk about it, use it again, because it's really a good example of the aspects of the shift in time. Now, they say that show is supposed to be showcasing the aspects of how good Ray Romano, comedian actor, or Ray Barone in the show, how good his life is. He apparently has a doting wife, loving children. His children do love him. And, his have a mom and dad that adore him. When in actuality, that's not really the case, because, his wife does not respect him, or in the form of, even though she's presented as she does a lot of condescending things to tear him down, to destruct him, to make him seem like his what he thinks or his decisions don't really have merit. His father, and his mother is always placating that, and then his children really, they love him, but they don't really love him in the aspects of having a lot of, honest respect for him, because they see their mother always condescending him. So they're like, okay, so why take him serious, right? To the point to where, is that really a good life? Is that really a slice of life? Moving on to clothing companies, they would perpetuate the aspects, in the 90s and so forth, and leaking this out in the 2000s and then the 2010s and so forth, with the aspects of, this first, the aspects of how sassy mom can be. She doesn't have to be this frumpy old frau. She can have a lot of, spunk, right? When, there's nothing wrong with that, but it was perpetuating the aspects of spunk to me, in a very disrespectful manner, because we're saying spunk as she's a single gal out in the proud, when the aspects of the reality of the situation is, hey, that you are not that. Hi, Piper. Hi, Honky. Okay, sit here for a minute. Come here. I hungry. I know. Sit up. Sit here. Let me hold you. Yeah, can you let me finish though? It's not gonna take me long, baby. And I have to wait. Yeah, just sit here for a little bit. Just hold on, let me finish, okay? And it's just like, do you want to be perpetuating that sort of image? And then, man went to worse when it was this aspects of, hey, companies pulling on the bandwagon that, single motherhood, she can do it all on her own. And then, the aspects of the male role not being revered that much anymore, to the point of, Old Navy in the early, the 2020s, early, right when it was hitting, right in between COVID starting, releasing a campaign where it seems like it was, not seem like it was making more and more invasive attacks towards the implements of men and dads and fathers that Father's Day is nothing, which is just highly disrespectful. Just imagine, hey, bust your bubble. The people who think that way, there are moms out there, believe it or not, that aren't all that worthy or valuable for Mother's Day. Look at it at 2 coins, but it's just perfectly acceptable just to abash and say, "Oh, Father's Day is meaningless. Look at moms, da 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 da." And so, anyway, I think that's what we need to think about and understand when it comes to the aspects of Father's Day and fatherhood. That it shouldn't be, a time in which to take and sling and jab, or be derogatory. It just should simply, just like Mother's Day is, simply be a time to reflect and appreciate the men who are really men and who respect and enjoy their family and who will go to the ends of the earth to revere their family and who should be revered. Well, that's all I got for this week. So, I would like to know what you all think. You want to feel free to extend the conversation. Feel free to reach out to me. And as I said in the beginning of the episode, 2 ways to do this is through email and, of course, comments on YouTube. Alright, so this is me getting curtain for this week on to next week. So tune in, turn up, and absolutely take care out there. Bye-bye for now.